gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
What is going on, CaneSport, and good morning to you all. It is Monday, June 24th, and I would like to thank everyone for joining us on Good Morning CaneSport. I'm Izubee Charles, that is Stephen Wagner, and we have a ton of Miami Hurricanes news for you today. But before we get started, all right, if you guys did not know, it is commit season down in Coral Gables, and those guys are fired up. Yesterday morning, they landed their 10th pledge of that 2025 class when Miami Central linebacker E.J. Marson jumped on board with the Canes. Steven, another commitment from the Canes, fourth in the last week, second straight Miami Central product. You had the chance to catch up with Marson yesterday about his commitment. What are your overall thoughts about that pledge to the Canes and him as a prospect as well?
Yeah, this is another big get for Miami. And, I know we say that about, most of the commitments that Miami gets, but the reason why this is an important get is this is a really, really big linebacker prospect who's had a ton of interest from other Division I schools, who goes to Miami Central, one of Miami's biggest high school pipeline local powerhouses. Hurricanes have had very, very strong ties to Miami Central since, boy, I can't even remember when. Central is without a doubt one of the best high school football programs in the country. They turn out elite talent every single year. I would go so far to say is they will have a very, very good chance to finish with the number one overall defense in all of high school football across any level this fall. There are three real major stars at the helm of that Central defense. Miami has already landed two. One of them was Amari Wallace. The other was Ezekiel Marson. Now there's just one left. That's Randy Adarica, and I think we're all just kind of waiting for that moment.
Yeah, big time get for the Canes. And like you mentioned, that pipeline from Miami Central continues to grow. We have a ton of coverage on Marson from yesterday's commitment. We have a coach's take as well. His coach, Jude Joseph, spoke about him. And I love what he said. He's not the biggest, he's not the strongest, but he lives in that film room, and that helps him gain that advantage on the film. A real film junkie. He uses what he learns in the classroom and brings it on the field to excel. Over 100 tackles last year as a junior, and they expect him to be a big-time contributor this upcoming fall. So make sure to check out all of those stories on Marson. Also, this morning on the site, we have a ton of coverage from a busy recruiting weekend that happened yesterday in Coral Gables. Canes hosted 10 prospects for their final OV weekend of the summer. Guys like Yosei Epinesa, my apologies, Randy Adarica from Miami Central that we just mentioned, USC commit Drake Stubbs, local prospect Bryce Fitzgerald, Tylen Lee, and a few more guys. Wags, we had the chance to catch up with a few guys yesterday. What guys left the biggest impressions on you, and where do you think Miami made the biggest moves yesterday after catching up with the prospects that took official visits with the Canes?
Yeah, Epinesa definitely has to be one. I think Ben Hanks could be a guy that Miami is making a little bit of a move with. I personally think it's going to be Miami or Florida. That's just kind of my personal read on the situation. Both schools have recruited him very, very hard. He has very strong ties to both programs. Seemed like everything went pretty well in the official visit, so I'm keeping a very close eye I'm going to keep a very close eye on those two schools in his recruitment. Then another guy who I'm going to be watching very closely, and this is a guy who maybe not as many people know about, Tylen Lee. He's a three-star edge from Pace up in Milton, Florida, up in the Panhandle. This is a guy, Miami really started recruiting him a lot more intensely during the spring. We're able to get him down for an unofficial visit and then got down this weekend for an official. And then the biggest one, and I can't believe that I didn't lead off with this, S.J. Alafay-Tuli, the number 4 overall interior offensive lineman. He's a guy who can definitely play guard or center. I think personally he would probably be a little bit better, maybe starting out at guard and then moving over to center in his career. That's just my personal opinion. But I think that Miami is absolutely going to be a contender for him. He's the number 71 overall prospect in the On3 industry ranking and the number 4 interior lineman in the class.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of SJ as well. Really excited to see him work in person when Bishop Gorman comes down to South Florida and faces off against St. Thomas Aquinas later this fall. But A ton of guys were in the building down in Coral Gables this weekend, some guys that we didn't have the chance to catch on. A pair of defensive linemen in Jarquez Carter and Herbert Scroggins. Scroggins is an interesting case. So he was set to commit tomorrow on Tuesday, but right after that Miami visit, he postponed it. So I don't know what to take of it really. Maybe good for the Canes, maybe not, but I personally think it's a good sign for the Canes. I think Miami gave him something to think on, and he has to take a little bit more time before making his decision. Miami loves Scroggins. That staff had great things to say about him. Tons of military academy up in Georgia. Really, really awesome kid on and off the field, and a guy that you want in your program and that you could build around and help build culture. Love his potential. Not the highest rated recruit, but he passes the eye test. Is a guy that Miami thinks can mold into a great prospect. Jarquez Carter, another guy, not the highest rated defensive lineman, but the Cane staff is very, very high on him. Recently came off that Oviedo, Ohio State, made his way down to Miami. I kind of asked him, hey, what was the biggest difference between Ohio State and Miami? He's like, honestly, just the family feel down at Coral Gables and the weather. He's a Florida kid. He's never seen snow, and he said he doesn't want to see snow. So we'll see where that recruitment ends up. But a ton of news coming out of that weekend. So make sure to check all of it if you haven't. Well, just to wrap up, I know it's our final official visit weekend. I feel like these 4 weeks have flown by. Just what are your overall impressions and kind of, 10 commitments on the board right now? July is going to be super busy. How many guys do you think the Canes can land in that month of July when guys really start picking their schools and announcing their commitment?
Yeah, I think Miami could definitely finish with maybe another 7 or 8 commitments in July. I think they'll get some more in August as well before the season starts. I expect Miami to probably have 80 or 85% of their class completely finished by the time the season actually starts. Obviously, there will be some guys who we know are not going to commit for a while. One of them is going to be DJ Pickett. He's probably the top guy left on Miami's board right now. And obviously, there aren't going to be very many guys who are ahead of him. He's the number 4 overall player in the country. He's the number 1 cornerback. He can play corner or safety. Extremely versatile. Heck, I mean, you could even put it, from what I've seen, I mean, he could legitimately play wide receiver and be a 4-star prospect. That's how good he really is. I love DJ Pickett. A lot of people love DJ Pickett. He's not going to commit until probably October. Floyd Boucard, I think that there's a chance that he could actually end up committing during the season. He's mentioned that before. Or he could commit in July. That's also very, very possible. And as always, there's going to be 3 or 4 guys that Miami's going to try to chip away at during the season in the 2025 class that they're going to try to flip from other programs that they're kind of playing a little bit more of the long game with. So we'll see what happens, but I would expect the overwhelming majority of this year's class to be finished by the time the season starts.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. I feel like that's, kind of when we usually see it happen. We kind of see, it come in waves. We have the spring wave, and then it kind of dies down a little bit. Official visits come, that last week you really start seeing things pop off like we did last week. And I feel like this next few days, we'll probably see, maybe 2 or 3 guys come off the board for the Canes. And I'm really excited. Obviously, we'll have you covered with everything from top to bottom here at CaneSport.com. So make sure to keep an eye out on the site for a ton of recruiting news. We're going to jump into some team news as we our State of the U series, when we take a close look at position by position, unfiltered and unobjective, based on Miami's returning projected starters. This time, we take a look at the tight end room and the offensive line, 2 position groups that I'm very, very high on, especially that offensive line when you're bringing back guys like Inez Cooper, Francis Malinoa, Jalen Rivers, bringing guys like Zach Carpenter. Only position that's kind of questionable right now is that left guard spot, but I feel like after fall ball, when we get into camp, we'll figure that out. In the tight end room as well, led by Elijah Rojo, who has a ton of potential but hasn't been able to stay healthy. Really want to see what he can do this upcoming season. Then we have Riley Williams and Elijah Lofton as well. 2 guys I'm excited about to see what they can do, especially Lofton, who we both had as one of the freshmen that we think will make the biggest impact this upcoming season. Steven, I want to start with that tight end room. Just what are your overall thoughts about Coach Woodell's tight end room heading into 2024 after a bit of a disappointing season last year?
Man, if Elijah Arroyo can stay healthy, that dude will be a draft pick. I mean, the biggest thing about him is he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. But from everything we heard, he's an awesome guy who does everything right, works his butt off. He's a great teammate. Whenever he's been injured, he's been really, really supportive. He's been that positive voice in the tight end room. does everything he's supposed to at practice. Really, he's kind of the model player, and everyone is rooting for him to succeed. The deal has just been that he hasn't been able to stay healthy. If he can stay healthy, he will be a draft pick. That's a dude who has all ACC potential. But I think the guy who we're all kind of the most excited to see if he can make that jump here in his second season is going to be Riley Williams. I don't think there's any debate about that. He came to Miami very, very, very highly rated, a 4-star tight end from IMG, who, the Hurricanes recruited very well. At the time had a very close relationship with Stephen Fielder. Well, I shouldn't say at the time. He has a close relationship with Stephen Field, who at the time was the tight ends coach who recruited him. They saw him as a guy with a really, really high floor, but an even better upside. I think what we saw from Riley Williams at the spring game was that football was kind of starting to slow down a little bit for him. It looked like the game was starting to get to that pace where he could kind of, see things before they happen a little bit, so to speak. And I think he is poised to have a really, really good season if he's able to get the reps that we think he'll be able to get. If they want to rotate him and Elijah Arroyo in and out, I think that would be awesome. I think that would be a really, really good way to use them. If they want to use them together in different 12 personnel packages, I can envision scenarios where, maybe you split Riley out wide and then you leave Arroyo as a traditional inline guy. I think there are a ton of possibilities to get really, really creative with some of the different ways that you can use those two guys. I think those are definitely who I'm most excited about.
Yeah, and then we have Elijah Lofton, the guy I like to call the bull in the china shop, kind of like Marson, like I said earlier on the show, not the biggest, not the fastest, but every time he makes a play, it's, one that you're picking your jaw up after. During spring ball, kid was making one-handed catches left and right, making defenders look silly. So excited to see what he can do. And obviously we have Cam McCormick, the seasoned veteran, if I should say, of the group, who's, the do-it-all guy with them, kind of the uncle, like they call them of the tight end room. So excited to see what that group can do overall. Hopefully they can take that next step and get a bigger part of that offense, which a lot of people are excited for with Cam Warren leading that group. Want to kind of jump back with the offensive line, touch base on those guys quickly. Love what Coach Cristobal, Coach Mirabal are doing with that line, bringing in size, bringing in a guy like Zach Carpenter, who's played some Big Ten football, has experience, and they were really high on in the portal, identified him, brought him in. Like I mentioned, a little bit of question marks at that left guard spot, but I'm not too worried. A ton of guys that they can plug in that position. Samson Okunlola, got Tommy Kinzer. We got a few guys that I'm excited to see battle out for that spot. Steven, quickly, thoughts on the offensive line this upcoming season for Miami?
Yeah, I think the biggest question that a lot of us are going to have is how quickly Zach Carpenter is able to kind of mesh with the offensive line, because especially when you come in at a position like center, yes, it's a very cerebral position. Obviously, you have to be very smart to play center. I mean, I can't think of any successful centers in the NFL who are just complete idiots. But Zach's a very cerebral guy. He's a really smart guy. But in addition to that, it's also a lot about chemistry. What kind of chemistry have you been able to build in a relatively quick time frame with your offensive line? Because I think this is kind of this is kind of a little bit of the puzzle that you have to solve whenever you bring in a new center. Is this isn't an internal promotion? Zach Carpenter wasn't getting reps with the other offensive linemen all of last year. The other offensive linemen aren't used to every single one of his calls and cadences and last-minute adjustments and what have you. So they've been having to kind of develop this chemistry on the fly, which means that they had a limited number of spring practices to do it, and then they will have a limited number of fall practices to do it. Time is kind of the essence here. They're going to need to be able to squeeze in as much as they can in a pretty limited amount of time.
Yeah, excited to see what this group can do. And like I mentioned, if there's any two guys that I trust to build the offensive line, that's going to be Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal. So make sure to check out that latest part of the State of the U series on the site as we cover the tight end and offensive line group. We also continue our countdown of our top 50 roster players. We take a look at number 8, Francis Mauigoa, number 7, Andy Borregales, and number 6, Jalen Rivers. We're going to jump right back into some recruiting, but in the 2026 class, the Hurricanes hosted a trio of quarterbacks yesterday, Coach Shannon Dawson worked with a few guys that he's had his eye on for some time, starting with Darion Coleman, Michael Clayton, and Tate Reynolds out of Arizona. 3 prospects that the Hurricanes really got a close eye out on. I had the chance to catch up with Darion Coleman, who's loving the Hurricanes. This is his second straight weekend. He was down in Coral Gables, and he had a ton of great things to say. A lot of the dominoes are falling in that 2026 class with the quarterbacks, and it looks like the Canes are honing in on a trio of guys. Steven, you had the chance to watch all 3 of those prospects throw yesterday. What are your overall impressions of each guy, kind of where Miami stands right now? What do you expect moving forward from them?
Yeah, from a true gunslinger standpoint, I mean, I think it's got to be Darion Coleman. He can release it at so many different arm angles. He spins the ball really well. He's really accurate. It's a little bit smaller, but he's really mobile. And if you're going to be a smaller guy, you have to be able to be creative enough to throw it at a ton of different arm angles and to be a mobile dude who can escape the pocket and see over the big guys who are going to be blocking for him in front of him. He's really, really intriguing to me. I would keep a very close eye on him, especially now that Brady Hart has committed to Michigan, and obviously Diabell has committed to Texas, who are 2 dudes that Miami was after earlier in this class. I think another guy who's really interesting, and you just mentioned him a second ago, Tate Reynolds. So he's a 4-star quarterback who has been recruited to play football and baseball at the college level. And if he is going to go to college, because there is a very, very legitimate chance this kid could end up being a Major League Baseball draft pick. There is a very real chance he ends up getting drafted right out of high school to go play Major League Baseball. If he is to go ahead and play college football, if he is going to go to college at all, he's going to want to go somewhere where he's able to play both football and baseball. And so they were able to show him around the baseball facilities a little bit. Obviously, Shannon Dawson was able to work him out, get a look at his arm and everything. But I think he's really, really interesting as an athlete. Actually, I should say that I feel like he's a little bit more of a true athlete than just a quarterback, because when you look at this kid, I mean, he's built like an absolute freaking tank. Moves really, really well, runs hard and runs really hard downhill, hyper physical, absolute cannon of an arm. Can be a little bit inconsistent at times, but he's another guy who I think is really, really interesting too.
Yeah, those quarterbacks were to keep a very, very close eye out on. And speaking of quarterback position, Miami 2025 commit Luke Nickel recently competed, apologies for that, in the Elite 11 last week. He had a bit of a bumped out ankle, but still showed his best and finished in that top 11 group. Steven, you had the chance to speak with Nickel after he wrapped up the Elite 11 out in California. So what were your thoughts about that conversation with him and just his overall performances out there with some of the best quarterbacks in the nation?
Yeah, he's the first Miami quarterback to make the final Elite 11 cut. The cut of 11 elite quarterbacks, the top 11 quarterbacks in the country. He made the final cut, and he is the first Hurricane to make the final cut since Brad Kaya did it way back in 2013. And I remember watching Brad Kaya on TV whenever I was, probably a freshman, sophomore in high school, and thinking to myself, man, this kid looks like the truth. But yeah, that's how long it's been since Miami has had a quarterback who made the final cut in the Elite 11. Because obviously Emory Williams was invited, and then I believe Tyler Van Dyke was actually invited. I might be mistaken, but I think TVD was invited too. Anyway, it has been a while since Miami had a quarterback who was actually named as one of the top 11. But Luke Nickel's really fired up about it. He said he felt like he gave it everything he had. He felt like he left everything on the field. He's proud of the product that he put out there. And, it's kind of one of those deals, you do everything you can, and then, you let the cards land where they may. The cards landed. Luke Nickel's one of the top 11 quarterbacks. Obviously, he wanted to be the Elite 11 MVP. He wanted, he wanted to win the damn thing. But he's still really, really proud of the product they put out. And it seems like everyone else has been pretty impressed with the job that he's done. Someone asked me if I think that he's going to get a rankings boost because of this. Well, I can't really speak. I'm not really sure I can speak for the other sites, but from the On3 standpoint, I'm not sure how much more of a ranking boost that a guy like him can really, really get, because you look at him and he's already the number 146 overall prospect in the country. I think he's the number 13 quarterback. He was named one of the top 11 quarterbacks in the country, and a quarterback class that's shaping up to be pretty interesting, on a number of levels. But I think that there's not a single person in Miami's room who isn't very pleased with the effort that Luke Nickel put out and the performance that he ended up finishing with.
Yeah, Shannon Dawson identified his guy early in the process, got Luke Nickel on the board, was the first commit in that 2025 class, and I don't think there's much that can, change Luke Nickel's thoughts on the Hurricanes. He's locked in with the Canes. We know that Florida State and South Carolina kind of made a bit of a push, but that really never went anywhere, and he solidified that commitment with the Canes after the official visit. Saw some clips of Luke, tossing the rock around at the Elite 11, and I loved what I saw from him. Elite prospect on the field and even better kid off the field, and like I mentioned earlier, type of guy that you want in a locker room. And the Canes think they got a bona fide star in Luke Nickel that's going to make a lot of people second guess their evaluations when he gets to Coral Gables. So make sure to check out that update on him and the plenty of other stories that we have on the site from the weekend and this morning. For Stephen Wagner, I'm Izubee Charles. Thank you for starting the day off with us. Hopefully you have a great rest of your day.